Welcome to the Time to Grow Up Dad podcast with your host, Chong, and I've just edited the episode that I did with Jenny. And it was a pretty good episode, particularly coming from the angle of someone who has already sort of gone through the initial stages of parenthood and having kids who are starting to really grow into teenagers. Before I go into my reflections, I do want to kind of preface I would really love to chat to parents who have kids who are a lot older as well, and particularly late teens or young adults. So if you are listening to this and you sort of fall into that realm, please reach out. I would love to kind of hear your thoughts as well on your journey thus far and some takeaways. But more importantly, a reflection on the episode. So it was a pretty interesting episode, and giving it really kind of gave me a bit of a fresh perspective on what it might potentially be like 5 to 10 years from now when our kids start to actually grow up, particularly in this modern, highly technologically advanced internet era. And one of the big things was sort of, at least that really stuck with me, was the fact that technology will be here, social media will be here, whether you like it or not. Growing up, I remember Jenny was saying how she was on the phone with her best friend after having a big long yarn in school, going back home, still having the phone. And I remember those days too. And I can see how this has sort of evolved over time from having the phone next to your ear, talking for hours on end, to actually just being on your phone on social media, talking on Instagram, Facebook, and all these types of sort of social media platforms. And very interestingly, when before I sort of became a parent, I always had this preconception that, you know what, like I'm going to try to have technology away from my kids. I'm going to try to keep them exposed, but not give it to them too early, so to speak, or like try my best to make sure that they don't get exposed to the world or social media because, there's quite a lot of bad things that could potentially happen. But as I started to become a parent, as I talked to more parents and sort of reflecting on my upbringing as a kid and thinking about how my parents parented me, there's probably going to be things that they didn't have growing up that I've got. CDs, cassettes, all that kind of stuff. And there's probably going to be things that my kids would have that growing up that I wouldn't have growing up into social media, and having all of the access of the world being connected, less so in a very physical manner, more so in a very digital manner, which was also something that Jenny brought up where in her line of work, or at least the way she sort of views it, is that connection is a very important piece for essentially all human beings. How we decide to connect, whether that be going out to a local park, going to play sport, or playing games online, or chatting through social media channels. Different eras would have different ways to, different eras would have different means of methods of connection for every individual. And it just so happens in this point in time, as of this recording, 2024, the primary means of connection is through the internet. And something she said where I think her 11-year-old was, she was going to turn 11. I think she said like 11-year-olds coming up and she will be giving her a phone. And that's quite interesting because obviously when I was growing up, I didn't actually have a phone until I was pretty sure I was 16. And the reason why Jenny sort of thought about it that way is because, well, they need the phone, and they contact the parents for in the event of after school curricular activities or emergencies and things like that. And some people will argue that, well, back in the day, we had emergencies. Go to the school admin and phone your parents. And while that's very true, I also do think how we teach our children to potentially use technologies, things like phones, social media, internet, is going to be very much on us. because those things are here to stay, whether we like it or not. So that was a very big takeaway from me. Another big takeaway that I've also got was how important it is to be engaged with the boring stuff that your kids are into, and you have to at least show that you take interest in it. I think Jenny used the example of being very interested in a digger, um, and you might not be interested in it at all, but you have to almost pretend you have interest in it because that's something that a kid would be super interested in. And if you don't sort of share that interest, they might kind of think like, the way I kind of view it and think about it as the conversation was happening and editing was like, they might think you're weird, or they might think they are weird because it seems like the kid, is the only one who's interested in a thing. So I think showing interests can also help to build their relationship between parents and kids as well, which is obviously one of the main things I was very, very impressed. And one of the things I do want to kind of at least model by example is that Jenny has a very good relationship with all of the kids. And that's something I do inspire and look up to. And, I really want that to kind of happen for me as well when my kids grow up. She also talked about don't be afraid to have me time. And it was very interesting because, again, before kids, like everything changes after having kids. Before kids, it's like, oh, you've got 24 hours in a day, go work out and stop doing this and do productive things and go to work. But, after having kids, like, you know, the way I see it at this point in time, at least, like doom scrolling, controlled doom scrolling is actually it's not actually a bad thing. And one thing she said, and I think she said something along the lines of like locking herself in a room and just get it out of the system and come back out again. I thought that was actually very interesting because I actually sort of do this in a way in the morning where I allow myself to doom scroll, sort of getting it out of my system so that as I get on with the day, work, family, and all that kind of stuff, I'm less prone to doom scroll. And potentially as a result, I would be a little bit more present with my kids and my family. Prior to that, I will probably just doom scroll whatever I want, because I don't have any much responsibilities, right? I just need to work, make a living, pay the bills, be a good husband, stuff like that. But now, the way I see it is I have to be as present as I can. And look, in the end of the day, like if doom scrolling makes me feel good, and I do it in order to allow myself or to enable myself to be a bit more present with the entire family, why not? Because in the end of the day, like that's the best thing you can do, be present for the entire family. So my views on it ever since becoming a parent has changed quite a lot. And the fact that she also said to not be guilty about wanting to spend some time on your own just doing stuff that you want to do, I think a lot of parents miss that. And it's very interesting coming from a mother, because I think as fathers or dads, we have a little bit more luxury and leeway in a sense where we don't have that responsibility to breastfeed because, well, we don't have the body structures to do so. And so when dads, males particularly, have that ability to go, okay, like I'm going to go out for an hour, I'll be back, it doesn't feel as bad as compared to a mum, particularly new mothers, breastfeeding, because if you go out for an hour and you come back, you might potentially miss the window of breastfeeding and it's kind of on you. Maybe you need to pump, to because there's a timing thing. So I feel like coming from a mother saying that you need to take time out for yourself and don't feel guilty, it's so true. It's so true. And I think more mothers need to do that. And I also do feel, if you're listening to this and you're a mom and you don't have the ability to do that, definitely communicate with your partner to ensure that you at least get some time for yourself. it's sort of almost uh, in tandem with the whole doom scrolling thing, because if you don't have time for yourself, you almost feel like you're giving up everything. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that you're giving up everything, I think, as a parent, but I think there still needs to be some part of things that you do for yourself for selfish reasons so that your own sanity is kept in check, and thus you can be the best parent to your kids that you can be. And I think that kind of starts from you having that mental space to go, okay, yeah, cool, I've gotten insert X activity out of my system. Now I can sort of go and do what I need to do. I think that's important, and that's really it. Really stuck with that really stuck with me to ensure that any type of activity you do for yourself as a parent, don't be guilty, because it's not actually a bad thing. If in fact it is a good thing. And the way I sort of view this is that when I go to jujitsu, I come back, I generally just feel a little bit better, like I go out for gym, I come back, I just feel a little bit more present. Whereas if I didn't or weren't able to do that, I'm generally pretty moody. And that's easy for me to say again because, I'm the dad, like I have the opportunity a little bit more. But I will also say for mothers who are potentially listening to this, or husbands, partners, dads who are listening to this, make sure that you provide that space for the female figure or mother, or make sure you find that space if you're the mum to do things that you want to do. Communicate that over to your partner and say, hey, I need to do this thing, give me an hour. Or if you're, in my case, the husband, tell your wife, say, hey, cool, I'll put him down, I'll put her down, whatever it might be. I'll do this, I'll do that. Just give them some time. Take the toddler out for a walk, even for 30 minutes. They appreciate it. So, yeah, that's all the reflections I have. It was very, very good to speak to someone who is a lot farther along the parent track than I am. Hopefully, you enjoyed this short-ish episode, and we will be back next week for another interesting conversation with another guest. Don't know who it is, but we'll see what happens when the edits are all done.